in 3, 2, 1. So we're going to just straightforward, right? So we need to understand what religion is in our world, right? So in case you're real quick. So religion, we as government, we believe that you're not as when in this motion is that you don't inherently purposefully expose religion to this type of people, right? It's like saying that it's not like, oh, because religion is subjective, we must understand that everybody has a different picture of what religion is, right? And we must understand that religion is basically having, usually when you have religion, you're basically thinking of, oh, something that happened in the, something that was written in the past that you want to bring forward in the future. Basically what religion is a concept that is in the past, but some of it can still be implemented in the future, in modern day society. So next, what children is, right? We must understand that we live in a time and age where ideas are changes at a fast rate, where everything that can be accepted changes at a fast rate, right? We look at example like last time when you bring in women, right? People think that, oh, they might be submissive, but now it has changed, right? And we push for gender equality. Second, we must understand that children, they are impressionable. What does this mean? It means that what they will see is they will adapt, right? They will ask questions about it, and they believe in they usually believe in what their parents say, and they usually are very creative in what they see. That's why you can see that a lot of videos online about what their kids do, right? They are really creative and they want to know more, right? So first, on why influence of parents are so important in this debate, right? We must understand that kids, they spend most of their time with parents, right? And they trust their parents the most because that is what they know best as kids, right? So we must understand that when they are under the authority of the parents, right? And when you want to have religion in the world, what you're doing is that you're forcing these ideas on your child, and they are not allowed to opt out at all because it's what their parents want to instill in them. So essentially what you're doing is that you're not giving them any freedom of expression. You are oppressing these kids and you're stripping them of their right way. So what does this mean is that the parents, they influence the way this child thinks principally. And what does this mean? It means that you're going against the right of the children without any consent at all, and these thoughts will be instilled onto them until the future. Why? Because these kids, because every person right in this room right now, all their values they believe are built since young. It is based on the experience that they had since young. So what does this mean is that when a kid interacts with their parents the most, they have more experiences with them. That means they are more likely going to think in direction of them, and they trust them the most because since young, the first thing they see are their parents. They interact with their parents the most, right? And the impacts of this are simple. Is that first of all, hold on, let me finish this first. Is that children will be molded based on interactions that we want children to be molded based on interactions with modern day society, because they will have these thoughts asking why this thing happened, or like why do we have this building, right? And my second speaker will talk about this further. And it is symmetrical in both sides of the world, but at least it's a modern way of thinking. It's not thinking of, oh, we have this because of God, right? We have this because God gave this something like this to us. And is that your point?
So what is the world like on your side? Are children only going to be exposed to the religion when they become an adult?
Okay, this answer is very simple, right? Children cannot have exposure to religion or have explicit exposure to religion. When they grow up and when they know what is best for themselves, when they have their character, they can choose to have religion, right? It is their choice, and it's not like it's not like they not having the choice since young, because when you instill these thoughts into them, right, they cannot think. When they grow up, they think a certain way because of religion, because of what they experienced since young. So, second point on why these ideas is vital for these children to be creative, and why a creative world, creative people would strive in this world. We can see in modern day society that people who are successful, they are creative. Look at all the CEOs, look at the people who have high ranking, right? And even like when you are debating, right, you see that people who are creative tend to be more successful because it's something that goes against the norms, and people will criticize of it and they will become a better person. So creativity is actually very important, and when you have religion, you are limiting them to this. Like you are limiting them to their creativity because you are instilling certain ideas since young rejected. So what are you doing is that so what Opbench is essentially doing, right? You are trapping these kids into religion because they do religion, which first of all, they do not consent. Second of all, you ruin their future because you make them think a certain way since young because of because of the pressure since young, right? Second, of why people values are based on things that they experience since young, right? It means that you're thinking a certain way. It means that you're acting a certain way, right? Everything like this happens since young. It's like, why? Because of the experiences that you have, because of the interactions that you have, right? Experiences are like things that you did, right? Things that you did or things that you experienced with your parents, right? When you, like for example, you have a traumatic, let's say Gordon Ramsay, right? You have a traumatic experience since young, and that's why the way they think is certainly very different and very different from others, and that applies to everyone. Because when you think something, when you experience something like, oh, your parents are being abusive to you, you would think a different way to other people whose parents are thinking better to them. So when you have religion, and when you have religion in these type of things, what would you do is that you will accept this type of things because you believe in your parents, because when you have religion, what you are doing is that you believe that everything happens for a reason, and you don't know how to tell the difference. There is no line to differentiate things because you believe that everything happens for a reason. But in reality, that doesn't exist, right? Second, when you have interaction, it might be with parents, it might be friends, right? And all of this builds character. And when you have religion and you believe that this type of things happen, do you think that people like this will be creative and will have the freedom of expression in the future to succeed, right? Second, so what we are doing is that we are molding these kids to who they are today and what they can be in the future. So when you put religion into the equation, it instills irrelevant ideas, right? Like, irrelevant ideas like, oh, you need to play your part as the guy in the family, and these things are irrelevant in today's world, and you are stripping them of their choice because you don't give them, and because you don't give this type of kids the freedom to think properly, because you are constantly oppressing them, because they think that you are, because they trust in you more, because you are an adult, because you are higher than them, because you have more experience than them, and they are scared of these people, and with that respect.
Alright, LOH here.
Want to be friends with certain type of people, which means that this type of influence will continue unto their adult ages. And then next argument is that if you instill this type of belief that God will always be there to help them since young, it will make them believe that because there's this like higher figure looking down upon me all the time, they'll only need to put in like a bit of effort into whatever they do. And on Gulf, we allow them to grow up in a more grounded, mindset and a more realistic mindset into how to look at reality. Like, we do not want them to grow up in this type of mindset that is, there's constantly going to be someone looking after you, because that is not, this is not what will make them survive in the real world. And then next, onto because these kids are impressionable, the third point I'm going to bring in is that they're often going to be victims towards abuse from religious authority figures. Now, first of all, because they're exposed to religion onto like this type of degree, it means that like parents are likely already a part of this type of organized religion, which means that even if they face any type of like mistreatment from like certain religious authority figures, even if they talk to their parents about it or talk to any other figures around them, like they'll still not be able to get the help that they truly need, because they grew up in an environment that has like, they surrounded themselves with this type of people who already believe that this is the correct thing to do. So because of this, these type of children, they grow up in a space in which they believe like other authority figures can always dictate on what their life is supposed to go. And for that, OG.
Alright, yeah, okay, here.
POS, preferably from my diagonal. Okay. Right, so starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, today's debate was never about whether or not religion itself was value neutral. It was about how we are supposed to disperse and feed these children these types of information, and whether or not it was inherently important for them to have religion in order to have a life that's inherently good in the first place. But how I'm then going to structure my speech is very simple. I'm going to elaborate a little further on what my first speaker has already told you before moving on into responses, and notably a bit of weighing and adding on to what they have already said. So first of all, let's explain a little further on why religion functions as a tool for solace. Note that this is the most important thing that we have to note in today's debate, because given that any argument that is going to come from closing is still going to be inherently contingent on being able to access this thing in the first place. So one, few layers of mechanization. It's inherently accessible because one, being able to access scripture or being able to access things related to your religion is something that's inherently easier to do in status quo. But also number two, having a community of religious people around you is more likely to be formed on side opposition. And why this is inherently important is because having a sense of community is important for you to be able to attain to be able to suffer less in times of crisis, in times of war, etc. And this is especially important when it comes to vulnerable communities, which I will explain even further. But also number three, being able to congregate with these religious people during those instances. But let's explain a little further as to why it is especially important for religion to function as this tool for solace, especially for children. One, this is inherently important because children are the most harmed when they can't rationalize what's going on around them. Think children in war, during Palestine, during the war on Gaza or stuff like that. Children are unable to understand what is going on around them, but why is it that religion allows them to feel better about themselves and allow them to continue living on? This is because having the existence of religion is able to teach them that there is some meaning in the struggle. There is inherently a reason as to why you should keep going on, and why there are and this also leads to you being able to be able to fit into your community and bond together with the people who are struggling with you. This is important because even if we concede to the fact that government wants to push that you are going to be stuck with a bunch of like-minded people for a very long time, we still say that to be able to access any degree of change or to access any degree of choice is inherently contingent on you not being dead. But also number four, this is the most important weighing in today's debate. OG needed to prove a threshold of harm when it comes to being having children opt into these religions to actually have any degree of impact. CG has to elaborate further on this. But let's move on as to why a few responses towards their side of the house. A little bit of mechanization that on our side of the house as well. Let's explain a little more on why the mechanization of the first argument, on why religion is able to teach children well, and why it's inherently exclusive to our side of the house. And also, note this also tackles what they want to tell you about creativity, because they never gave you any analysis about creativity then. So we are able to weigh over them by virtue of us actually giving material. But here's the material then. One, religion is inherently, religion is intuitive. You can follow religious stories, you can read religious verses and whatnot. And the things that these children follow are inherently based on faith. What that means is that even if we say that children do not question the values now, that's good, because children in their formative years are especially confused about what's going on around them. They don't really have any pointers, and even if I can say that I'm not really that religious now, I'd say that being able to opt into religion when I was younger has definitely taught me things better. But not just that, number two is especially important in formative years on the side government, because note that it's extremely hard to standardize teaching your children without any form of streamlined religion. Because here's the thing, you can teach your children, but that's contingent on you being a good adult. How are you then a good adult is something that they never talked about in today's debate. But here's the thing, religion is value neutral. Even if your parents are bad people, you can still be able to go to church, go to Sunday school, and learn things in pendidikan agama, and be able to ensure that you still turn out as a good child. But even if children don't question it now, we say, I will respond to this further on my third response, but children will still question it, and they will still be able to opt out of religion when they grow up. But even if they don't, it's not in the scope of within today's debate. Pure.
Earlier you mentioned that God is some form of God is kind, yet why do Syrian children go through a daily dose of Dante? And by extension, why do you still get solace on your side?
Can you repeat that?
Okay, in simple terms, God is kind, but Syrian children still have to go to hell every day. In extension, why do you get solace?
Moving on. So as to why, what my responses are, right? One, religion limits the way children think, or there's no opt-out. Okay, the simple response to this is that there literally is an opt-out. Like, even if it's significantly harder to opt out from religion, right? Here's the simple reality. They have no ability to opt into religion or opt out of what their parents have already taught them. What you are taught is so inherently ingrained by your parents that you don't really have much of an alternative. The reason as to why religion is still able to be opted out from is because a lot of people already call out religion in status quo. Like, even if we say that people are religious, it doesn't mean that you can't consume content that's necessarily, like, you can't consume content that is necessarily not of religious basis, and you'll most likely still have to interact with people who aren't inherently religious. Like, there are people who are religious who stop being religious when they grow up, so it's fundamentally untrue to say that opt-out is something that just doesn't exist in today's debate. But that, even if that is the case, why are we still backward? Like, we still tell you that parents probably, even if children are quote-unquote being taught, bad things, here's the reason as to why it's less likely to happen on our side of the house. Parents are very much unlikely to teach their children a lot of conservative values, because what you would want to teach as a children is to teach to a child is how are you supposed to be a good child, how are you supposed to do good things, or how are you supposed to finish your studies and whatnot. So to teach a child that a woman is inferior to you is something that I don't really understand as to why it would be the forefront of your parents, especially in the child's formative years. But today's debate isn't about religion being bad, it's still about the application of it. And even if a minority of parents end up teaching their children that, we still say it's better in a society that's devoid of this, where you're unable to call out their forms of behaviors. But let's also explain a little more on why on why this is inherently true, is that, very simply speaking, children will still be exposed to the external world. Children will still be exposed to other sorts of beliefs, and they'll still need to have their biases checked. So before I end my speech, Proverbs 28:13. Thank you.
Member Guff, here.
I'm just going to check here. Am I audible at the moment?
Yes.
That is wonderful. Prefer pronouns are there, verbal POIs please. Never mind. Try not to barrack, I will ask for POIs eventually, especially from the opening slides first.
Would you prefer POIs in chat or?
If only I could, but no matter. Okay, in which case I should start like this. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Jesus lost faith in God upon the cross, and in the same way, I've lost faith in the executioners of my side on the opening houses that were supposed to see to my butcher today. The first thing that opening house completely neglects is the incentive of the church, and we tell you that there are 3. Firstly, they want supporters to fund. Secondly, they want social power to forward their ideals. Thirdly, they would like to replicate religious ideology in order to forward their cause. We tell you that this all points to one thing: coercion, exploitation, and so forth. Even if religion is for the greater good, for the morality of the individual, I still cannot buy that the process is one that is not tainted by blood. In which case, we already went out on the opening houses by the get-go from this framing. We tell you then on the second thing and the second characterization that was missing from both sides, it's just that the way churches operate is one that is operating on a cycle of indoctrination. A kid gets indoctrinated, turns into a parent, has this very identity under church, and then wants to forward their kid into the very identity and the very pillar of cause that they have as well. Right? We tell you that this sort of thing is why conservative ideals and values are still forwarded within an individual's identity, insofar as to then say that these are the very values that are able to maintain and sustain the church's and religion's power within a society. Which then goes on into my 2 extensions, firstly on the principle of agency. Note 3 prerequisites. Firstly, rationality. Second, all access to information within, and thirdly, autonomy. Note now that we are going to defend anything that helps these 3 prerequisites be fulfilled to the maximum of the ability. Opt has none of these. Rationality does not exist for 3 reasons. Kids are naive, they misunderstand information very easily, and there's not enough education at the point in which that they are opted in.
Yeah,
Secondly, under the lack of information, firstly, they can't understand it, it's too deep. Secondly, they oftentimes keep stuff from the children in order to maintain them, or at least they just perceive them as being unable to understand. Thirdly, autonomy. Parents help these kids make the decisions because kids at that age are not perceived to have the autonomy to do so. In which case, we tell you, secondly, it's just that kids can't contain themselves. Before I continue, K1.
So if children, if children don't really have autonomy on our side of the house, how is it that the children are going to be seen as equal on your side of the house and actually have these concepts taught to them properly?
This is not about children when they are children. This is about children when they grow up. The point of this whole thing is to tell you that these children are held accountable for their actions in the future. Moving on, because I'm going to exactly respond to this right now. Note now that they don't have agency, and the harm is twofold. First, religion is coercive, right? You realize that now they have an incentive to spread and increase worshippers. They have this sort of indoctrination cycle that occurs. The threats then, they then point towards things like threatening kids into staying and making very coercive efforts, right? The second thing is just accountability. Note now, society holds an individual accountable for the actions that they undertake. We now see that if you still don't have the agency and you are opted into such a thing at the very start, and especially when we've already proven that religion has an incentive to indoctrinate you, you are now held accountable for the actions that occur or the stuff that, or the sort of things that you are taught later on as a child, despite the fact that you have absolutely no consent over it whatsoever. We now realize that we are able to contextualize this within our debate as having all three prerequisites and solving these problems. Firstly, on rationality. We think that by the time a kid turns 18, they are educated enough, they've matured and they've grown over the age. A decade or two is more than enough time for an individual to learn about life, right? Secondly, about information, we think that they are going to understand the depth of the item at hand. And secondly, they are probably given access to information as they are perceived to actually understand this sort of info by that point. Thirdly, on autonomy, these people are literally by legitimacy's sake legal adults and also probably disciplined enough to forward themselves to the point of the age of 18. Screw it, I'll take another one.
Children are already coerced into things they don't want in every single other aspect of your life. You aren't coerced to go into tuition. You probably don't choose the school that you go to. What's the principal impact of being coerced into religion?
All of these things go to forward an individual's ability to make your own decisions because that means you get more education. Thank you. Argument here is just very simple. The second extension is about better churches and religion. And this is our unique extension here. The problem is that this cycle of indoctrination is one where the kids get indoctrinated religious, they get this very heavy religious identity, they turn into a parent and then they indoctrinate their kid again, right? And this is likely because the parent has this incentive to do so where that's like the core identity, they are indoctrinated into doing so, and then replication of the ideology of the church. We now see that in order then to maintain religious social capital, it fulfills the incentive for the church to keep this sort of cycle of indoctrination. Solutions twofold. Firstly, churches force, the solution on the side is simple. Churches are forced to use other means to do so. Note here that at the point in which a teen is only exposed to church when they're 18, the teen is no longer impressionable. They're not as indoctrinatable as a kid, right? And by this point, they have rationality. They are interacting with greater society. And that means they are affected by the social narrative and trends that exist under that society. We think that these trends probably look like things like activism, a feminist movement, LGBTQ, for example, that sort of thing, right? And we think that if teens and adults are opting into stuff like activism, then the church needs and likely needs to change in order to continue getting the sort of supporters on their side of the house. The reason is very simple. If the church continues a contradictory, conservative ideal that would otherwise retain their cycle of indoctrination, you now realize that they are not going to get anyone because no one is as easily indoctrinatable as that. We now see that then, via those incentives and via the exact incentives I characterized at the very start of my speech, that churches are more likely to scale the change of the ideals of the church proportional to societal change in order to catch up to societal trends and narratives. That is to say that churches are going to have to adapt themselves in order to maintain and sustain the type of ideology that they would like to forward. We tell you then that we are able to flip opening opposition's argument on like this sort of like church and pillar of support because we think that, yeah, people do have an ability to opt in, right? We think that then that ability to opt in is one, that ability to opt in, but only while they are rational, is one that allows and forces churches to adapt as they go in order to still continue this. At the end of the day, we think that a final outcome of this is just to all say, at a very high scale and a very high likelihood, churches are going to change according to social narratives in a way that does not contradict the social hegemony in order to support their own cause. Very proud to propose.
Sit down.
Can.
To the previous speaker, I would also like to quote a Bible verse, Luke 22:16. And Peter said, "Man, what are you talking about?" I have so many things to say about this round. You have no idea. 3 components in my speech then. Firstly, I'm going to be briefly taking down the entire government bench on the 2 arguments that they hinge on. Secondly, I'm going to be integrating how we differentiate from all into my 2 extensions. Firstly, on religious extremism and how adults and children are going to comparatively fare under the worst case scenario of opposition. And secondly, on how religion acts as a set of conduct, because that's going to be specifically important in the way we differentiate from all. So firstly, on some 2 pieces of framing, right? We tell you that religion, as it is slightly marketed to children, is probably not going to be telling you that you're going to go to hell if you steal the cookie from the cookie jar. It's probably going to be marketed to you in child-friendly ways that tell you when you sit down at color pictures in Sunday school, people tell you that Jesus loves you and will always care for you. Or it looks like encouraging Muslim girls to wear the hijab because it's something that is empowering or something that is in alignment with virtue of their religion. We tell you that is what specifically marketing religion to children is not going to look like. It's going to look like, it's probably not going to show them pictures of infernos and hellfire and telling them that that's where they're going to go if they do transgress against God. But even if we do, we tell you that there's the mechanism of being able to repent and being able to return from your sins that does encourage children to a positive mindset. But then on to adults, right? We tell you that the way that religion is going to be framed to adults, because note the counterfactual here, right? Because we don't understand what government's counterfactual here is. Are they only going to market the religion to you when you're an adult? And if that is the most likely case, right? We tell you that they're likely going to be less child-friendly in the marketing, that they're probably going to be comfortable talking to you about sexual material or comfortable talking about things that they otherwise wouldn't discuss with children because they think that you are an adult, you are 18 years of age and you're mature enough to handle it. So that's specifically the difference in how the religion is going to be pushed to these people, right? On to some responses then on OG, because note the lack of counterfactual. Firstly, I don't know what the word looks like. But on to the idea of stripping children of their rights and coercion. I can respond to this in one last time from CG also. Notice that coercion happens at every single point in your life. None of the decisions you make are entirely of your own understanding and your own full convention. There's probably still some external factor into every single decision that you make that makes it not fully your own decision. Especially this applies to children who don't have rights to the same extent to adults for very good reason. They don't have right to sign off on their own medical documents. They don't have the right to choose what school they go to, what food they eat, and what tuition they want to go to, because that's simply things that they are not ready to choose. We tell you that at the point where people already have control over every single aspect of your life and you already have no rights, you already don't consent to most things, and that doesn't matter because you are a child. I don't know why this is uniquely different or harmful when it comes to religion. And even if you want to talk about how these things only apply because they are good, then that really lessens the burden for opposition, right? Because all we have to tell you is that religion is good and we can win the debate. But then on to OO, right? Because notice the incredibly soft case that they run. They tell you that religion acts as a guidebook and a way of life, and that you can opt out of religion when you grow up. They tell you this and that, they treat religion as this secular therapy group where everyone can sit down and talk about how much they love God. But CO takes a hard line on this and engages with government on the highest burden of religious extremism and how people end up growing up to be conservative and homophobic. They also talk about how suffering children can feel solace, but Scone tells us that the debate is about whether or not religion should be exposed to children at a young age, but then it proceeds to talk about why religion is good or bad. So I'm going to be arguing with this on both fronts, whether or not it should be exposed to children because it is good or bad. If the opening time is not going to debate the debate, I can take your analysis into this house supports religion movement and still win. So firstly, onto the extension then on how religion acts as a set of conduct. Because OG tells you how you adapt to have good values, but CO is going to tell you about how we deter children from things that they otherwise would fall victim to. For example, social flaws like being addicted to drugs or engaging in premarital sex, because these are all things that religion condemns. We tell you that religion teaches mostly good things. Firstly, to respect others, to help each other, to respect your parents, and to not do things like drugs, or to not have premarital sex, or to not engage in otherwise behavior that is seen as immoral. We tell you that specifically also they introduce a concept of heaven and hell and sin and repentance, because it is something that deters people engaging in these things in the first place. Because if there's no consequence to engaging in these things, then you probably just won't, then you probably still continue to do it in the first place. So the point is that you are able to, like, even if you do engage in these things, that you are able to repent. So the fear, like the entire opposition, like the entire government push about how you are going to like live in fear of being sent to hell doesn't really work, because one, you can still repent, and two, it's necessary for the religion to be effective. We differentiate from OO because OO only wants to talk about the religion like it's a self-help book. We say the specific idea of sin is what makes children follow these religions more than other ideas. So even if you want to say that religion is a coercive, coercive hive mind that makes you homophobic and makes you scared of going to hell, we tell you we still benefit under that front because OO doesn't talk about that. They only want to debate on the best case. We tell you why we take the highest burden and still win. Religion also has an internal reward system because if you are good, Jesus is going to, like, if you are good, then you're probably going to be accepted in, like, you're probably going to go to heaven. And if you like follow the set of conduct that you've been, like, has been asserted to you by a religion, you are probably going to like to have a better afterlife, even if you do suffer in this life and even if you do face opposition. Jesus loves you and you are a better child of God as a result, for example. And it's just like better than other forms of conduct because one, children can tangibly feel its impacts when they are able to perceive that there's someone out there who unconditionally loves them, but that wants the best for them and wants them to take a better direction in life. And two, they are more likely to buy into this concept when they are exposed to it from childhood because they are more malleable, because they are able to perceive religion in a more positive light from a young age. That's specifically the difference on opposition. But the impact here is that firstly, children just don't opt into things that you shouldn't do. For example, not doing drugs, not getting addicted to things, or just not religiously, just not getting pregnant on the streets. We tell you that is already something that as long as children are deterred from doing so, that there's already a net benefit. They make less irreversible mistakes, and they make significantly less irreversible mistakes that they're unable to bounce back from, that they're unable to get their lives back on track from as a result. The comparative here is that a child is already, like, as all sides of the house agree, a child is very malleable, is very easily influenced, and is someone who can very easily be persuaded into certain beliefs. We tell you that specifically if the way that their influence is good, that many influences already exist, and religion is not there as a counterbalancing narrative. We're under government, which is evidently worse. Let's talk about weighing then, because self-conduct versus conduct, corrosion and bad ideas, right? The weighing is irreversibility, because when you are pregnant, or when you're addicted to drugs, or you get kicked out of your house, that is something that is irreversible. That is a decision that you cannot take back. However, for things like even under our worst case, where a person is taught how to be bigoted under opposition, we tell you that that is something that you can still reverse insofar as you are a child, you are malleable, and you can change. On to religious extremism then, and how adults and kids comparatively fare. We tell that children are literally incapable of imposing the harm that comes from religious extremism. Because if the narrative that's taught by the church is bad and people have ended up being homophobic, we tell you three things. Firstly, they're just literally unable to commit hate crimes to the same extent as someone who is someone who is adult and has the first level of rights. But secondly, we tell you that they're more likely to be accepting of different beliefs and more accepting nuances because they are malleable, because hate is taught and it's not ingrained in them, and it's something that is fresh and can be changed. They have to interact with people that don't agree with them. And we tell you that it's infinitely worse when you're an adult and when your belief compass is set in stone and when you're significantly more able to commit the hate crimes that actually exist to the worst extent under government.
Halfway.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Self-actualization, solace, and a sense of community is not exclusive benefit coming from side opposition. What is exclusive is the fact that we're able to instill more progressive ideals in religious institutions, which the scale of impact way over whatever impacts the side opposition has given in today's debate, right? So first thing I'm going to do is to engage with material coming from OO and CO. Some of them we blend together, so I'll be responding them at the same time, right? Firstly, is side opposition, opening opposition's point on how we don't need, children do not need to hold on to religion forever, and we can just expose them and let them decide later on whether or not they want to buy into this religion, right? Firstly, they don't respond to our analysis about how the likelihood of them opting out in the first place when the religion is deeply ingrained into their childhood, into their livelihoods, and their social practices in the first place. They don't engage with us. But secondly, they tell us about things like community and solace, and that's their main benefit coming from OO. old, right, about religion and whatnot, we tell you that this is not exclusive because community can exist in many other forms, like in your school, in your kampung or whatnot. Like you can join different clubs in your school and bond over similar interests. That can also give you a sense of community. That can also give you a sense of solace. You can talk about your problems, interests or whatnot. So I don't see why it's exclusive on the church. But we say that your form of community and your form of solace that comes from the church is especially harmful towards the children. Why? Because when you buy into the only reason why the church is giving you all these forms of support and social structures is because they want to gain something for you. They want to expand their following. So what actually happens when you decide to opt out of the church at later stages of your age? You lose all forms of support. You lose the community that you have trusted for years and years of your life, right? That is what you lose on side of opposition. This community is not something that we want to instill in children at a young age, right? On the comparative, people will actually try to find people outside of their religion, and try to find people that are not friends with them just because that got contingent on their religion in the first place. That's why your form of community and your form of solace is not long term and will eventually perish if the child actually does try to opt out of this religion in the first place, right? That's why your main impacts don't exist. But secondly, the CEO talked about something about children are coerced on a daily basis or whatnot, but like forms like tuition and stuff like that. Although we concede that parents are sometimes not can make certain decisions, but we think that forcing them into religion and practice religious practices is a step too far, because we believe that religious codes of conduct encompasses every form of aspect of life, not just you spending a few hours of your life in tuition, right? This looks like religion. They control the food you can eat, the things you can wear, the people you can associate with. It's not just going to tuition or whatnot, right? And what shows you can watch. Children need to have the ability to shape their own individual choices. Instilling religion at them at such a young age, often you have to realize and concede that it involves coercive practices. Forcing them to observe rituals like fasting and whatnot are just a step too far, because it encompasses life aspects, their basic decency and their rights to choose what they want to eat or whatnot, right? It's traumatic and hard to unlearn as adults. And side opposition tries to tell us like, oh, they can just like forget about it when they are adults, right? The comparative is better for two reasons. Firstly, because people make decisions about which religion they opt into when they are older, when they are over 18, and they are rational and mature, and they have enough information to make a correct decision, right? But secondly, people can properly derive solace and comfort from other practices and beliefs that they truly believe in and not forced into at such a young age, right? Which is what side opposition is trying to push these children into. Thirdly, what do they tell us? OOs said that religion is already being called out in the status quo, and we don't need to do that. We don't need to just like force children to not opt into this first place, right? But you don't realize that this form of call out is just ineffective, and like the church in the status quo just lacks a lot of accountability in the first place. So, like we say that the comparative is that religion can't do this, because as we said, like religion is seen as a tool of indoctrination or whatnot, right? So children of religious parents expect to be raised in like religious households, and they are shaped and coerced into staying into that religion, and the community reinforces this norm, and people who reject it creates a system where religious retains a lot of power, right? But comparative with outside house is religions can't do that. They need to show a lot of relevance to society. They are more likely to evaluate and be better and be more accepting of like more liberal norms now that they have like more accountability, and they have less leeway to indoctrinate people and whatnot and abuse its following, right? On our side of the house, because they have a smaller following and like the children just don't automatically like go into the religion their parents in, their following will be smaller, meaning that they are more likely to use less coercive like tactics. Because obviously, if you see the other religion being like less coercive and you think that they can provide you with better quality of community or whatnot, you can just transfer to that religion and not buy into what you have done, right? So on our side of the house, we already proved to you why we have more progressive religious institutions instead of conforming to regressive norms the side opposition has taught you, right? On our side of the house, we already told you why the church in the status quo is very regressive, which is our main impact that comes on our side of the house, and the scale of impact outweighs whatever opposition has talked about, right? Which has not been responded to. Yeah.
So even so even if you do not allow for the church to change on itself, is it like Does the dispersion of ideas in the status quo allow for the people within religion itself to understand maybe there's something wrong with this?
Okay, when we say that the people we're trying to help, right, is we already proven to you why the church is likely to have the incentive to actually change the regressive norms in the first place. But the main stakeholder that we're trying to protect is the future of the people and the children who are going to opt into the religions, right? Outside closing government, our main impact is that we are trying to break the cycle of indoctrination within families, right? On our side of the house, there are no like regressive norms where religion tells women not to stay at home and get married and just depend on the man, and how like the Catholic Church upholds the contraception and whatnot. Children on your side of the house, children will be instilled with these values. They'll be traumatized and difficult to unlearn, right? The worst case is that long term they become a cycle and propagate this to their own children and whatnot, and the cycle continues, right? Opposition says that, on your side of the house you can instill whatever morals like to be a good person, but we say that that's not exclusive, right? Because the parents still have the incentive to teach and teach their children and make them good people, and that also is available in schools or whatnot. So on our side of the house, we believe the main impact and the winning content that comes from CG is that we are able to break this cycle of toxicity within the religious system. Very powerful.
Alright, pausing recording. Jules, the recording already started, bro. Shit. Alright.
Sorry. Am I audible at this volume?
Yes.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Let's keep things simple. This debate is not about religion good or religion bad. If religion is so prevalent, then we must concede that at some point in their life, most people will be exposed to religion. This debate hence takes place in the scenario in which we debate about when they should be exposed, at what age, and in what circumstance of their life. And insofar as this debate has gone on, CO is the only one that has been able to sufficiently prove to you why religion, specifically at a young age, is going to A, provide them a form of solace and community that they can't get otherwise, and B, going to prevent them from the forms of religious extremism and the violence that can cause when they are exposed to it when they are adults. And for this reason alone, we already watched every single house on the debate today. But before that, I think I'm going to take down house by house, right? Firstly, starting with OO, then CG, then OG. On to OO, because I think it's very simple why we weigh them out. Actually no, you know what, I'll start with CG first. Let's talk about the 3 main pushes that they wanted to do. 3. The first thing is maturity at a high age, which is why people can conceptualize religion when they are adults. Secondly, the indoctrination of the church. Thirdly, for some reason this came up in WIT, but about how they push more progressive ideals and lead to a more progressive society. On to maturity at a high age then. Firstly, this assumes that all adults, once they grow up, are going to A, not be stupid, B, not be bigoted, and 3, not be easily malleable by religion when they are forced into it. We tell you that the fact that adults can conduct more violence, and the fact that they can enact more violence, the fact that they are exposed to religion at a point in which they've already grown up and at a point in which they can already enact hate crimes, the fact that you never exposed to it from a young age means they weren't able to internalize these things and deal with them before they reach the age where if they were radical it was going to be harmful, is something that is extremely harmful coming from the side of closing government. But secondly, on the indoctrination of the church, I think this is irrelevant simply for the fact that they never mechanized why this was important. If the church is wants to indoctrinate you day and night, but you never prove the impact of why this is so bad other than, coercion, freedom of speech, I don't see why this has to be important at all. But thirdly, on the argument and wit, firstly, this shouldn't be credited considering that the first member of government only mechanized it in the last 10 seconds of his speech and the rest of it was mechanized by wit. But let's deal with it. Progressive ideals. Let's call out several lies, right? Firstly, we want to tell you the first thing. Just because kids are not exposed to religion does not mean that they're exposed to bad ideals. If my parents are homophobic and they can't tell me about religion because you don't expose them to religion, but the fact that they are homophobic still pushes homophobic ideals onto me. I'm going to ask you this, right? Is the majority of people who are homophobic against gay people because they think that it's against religion, or because they think it's weird and unnatural? Those reasons exist independently of religion, but we tell you why we win on our side. If people can still be homophobic, on our side, at least they know the reasoning behind it, and once you know the reasoning, you can deconstruct it, right? That's the reason why politicians, when they go up and say the most unintelligent crap, you can't deconstruct them because there's nothing to deconstruct and nothing but emotional rhetoric. But the moment in which you actually give them something to deconstruct and say, hey, being gay is a sin, that is when they can take that and say, oh, that is why people are not against gay people. But that's not true. That's something that shouldn't be true, and that's something that's not going to stop me from being able to be accepting of my gay friends. But secondly, I think Michelle has given you sufficient analysis as to why people, like children, even though they were religious and were Christian, were still able to be accepting of different communities. But the sole fact that it's children only and children specifically, they do not choose the people they interact with. As an adult, you often choose your circle the most. If you are homophobic by an adult, you can choose to isolate yourself. But as a child, you're in a classroom with 30 other people, 3 of them might be gay, and that is why you are able to deal with them and interact with them, and that is how you can become less bigoted. I think at the very end of this, it is completely unclear why the argument on progressive ideals is something that's exclusive and somehow better on their side, when the point in which hate crimes are likely going to increase on their side because the people are only exposed to religion when they are adults, and because they were never exposed to it before, never had the chance to deal with it before, never had the discussions that came from dealing with it before, never had the chance in order to interact with people from that community, and that is why they are more likely to enact those bigoted things. Yes?
I think you explained that it's worse to expose them during the adult phases. What's the scale of radical and violent adults in spite of legal and social structures in state school?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What's the scale of radical and violent adults in spite of legal and social structures in status quo?
Okay, it's not about the scale of how many radical adults there are. It is the scale of harm that one radical adult can do versus one radical kid. I think we've explained to you sufficiently why one radical adult can do so much more violence, but it's so fact that A, they're stronger, B, they're more intelligent, C, they have a better sense of direction, D, they can probably drive to a house and enact hate crimes. On to OO then. This is how we outweigh OO. Firstly, OO refuses to engage with the bad parts of religion. They want to deal with a watered down part because they refuse to trade it off. They don't want to deal with how sin is a big part of religion. They wash it into a secular therapy group. They put hands over their eyes and refuse to acknowledge that yes, children will be scared. Yes, children don't want to go to hell. At the end, they even want to agree that religion is overall bad when they say that you can leave your religion if you don't want it. OO toast the water of religion good, but we are deep into it. But lastly, we are going to call out their hypocrisy because they keep calling out OG for only debating why religion is bad, but they only debate about why religion is good. They never answer the big question, which is, if religion is so amazing, then and there are so many harms from it, then why can't you just wait until they're adults? But also, their really funny point on Israel-Palestine, dude, I think even if they're religious, right, if their house is getting bombed, I don't think that's going to do anything. But okay, then they say, And this was Sing Dan panel. They said that you can stop being religious if you don't want to. Okay, this is how we are going to be more important because we don't contradict ourselves. We don't say that parents are the ones that indoctrinate into religion, and then secondly say that you can leave religion because you don't have any community ties. But it's so virtual that your parents are the ones that indoctrinate you to religion. You do have community ties, and this is why we weigh over them. But lastly, two clashes why we weigh over them. Less violence is better than solace because we prove how we protect minorities, we tell you how we protect the LGBT at the point in which that people can internalize these values from a young age and can deal with them appropriately and have discussions before they reach adulthood. Secondly, we tell you how a set of conduct is better than community. But it's so virtue of the fact that I think that we should prioritize the benefit of having less drug users over having a sense of community. But onto OG, we think they are outweighed by two very simple things. The fact that Michelle already dealt with why coercing children is irrelevant because they are already coerced. And secondly, freedom of expression weighs less than people not doing stupid things. For the sole reason of this, I think we are the only side that's been sufficient to prove why religion specifically for children is so important, A, and B, why the set of conduct in religion is only able to be accrued the minute you concede that religion is not a secular therapy group, but a set of values in of itself. It should be celebrated for what it is. Thank you.
Alright, thank you everyone. You may go to the hall.
God, all of you guys are insane. I'm so scared. Yes, because
Please go to the hall.
I'm here to.
waiting.
I'm here to panel.
So,